What happens after death? Given the two possibilities just listed, there are two different ways that the post-death experience unfolds. Let's separate out each one for you during this section and explain what each path holds. Those who are open to receive love. For those who are open to change and willing to drastically change in the face of the loving vibration that meets them, a process referred to as orientation begins to unfold. This contains a sort of schooling to teach this portion of consciousness that still retains elements of personality about all of his or her major life choices, important relationships, and life-shaping experiences. This is a transition time for the element of the soul that carries and needs to process elements of personality. Soul itself does not need this time, but the human role the soul has been living through needs to be, so to speak, cleaned and calibrated. The emotional body has been further imprinted by this life, and a debrief of sorts needs to unfold to bring all the facets of that particular human life into focus. The guidance team, including often relatives who have preceded the individual, teach him or her to adapt the lens and filter through which his or her human self saw life, the world, the self, and others. The goal of this orientation process is to help this personality-flavored aspect of soul turn all grievances and regrets into accepted pieces of the human learning journey, for which he or she can be grateful to all the other souls involved in various situations and relationships for helping the soul as human to learn along its human journey. Views different from the human personalities are offered to the individual about how and why things happened during his or her life. It is about being oriented towards being loving, towards accepting love and understanding that all has happened to the person during life as part of the divine process of learning to become loving. The process of coming out of judgment of self and others occurs outside the time-space dimension. Mostly, these individuals in the process of orientation stay where they are, but sometimes they can come back briefly and make contact with the living. Numerous living humans have had the experience of a loved one who has died coming back as a spirit to visit, but there is something important that is different about the spirit of which the living human is very aware. There are many different reasons that this happens. All of the reasons have to do with nurturing the end or resolution of the relationship after death, including letting the living human know that the late loved one is okay, safe, happy, etc., or isn't judging the living human for anything and loves him or her. There is no rule about how often the late individual can visit a living loved one, by the way. When I say that they are in school, understand that it is not like any school you've been to. No one's watching the halls and making these beings watch and honor someone's clock-related behavioral code. On that note, the orientation process takes different amounts of time according to Earth time for different beings. Sometimes the process unfolds quickly and sometimes it takes a bit longer. For instance, one person might have two parents who pass away in a short span of time, and the mother seems to take years to go through orientation while the father passes through it rather quickly, or the other way around. There are no rules and there are no expectations, as long as it takes for a recently departed consciousness to process and learn is as long as it takes. Sometimes there are also variables to do with what is unresolved from the perspective of surviving loved ones. It could be that certain misunderstandings generated during the time when the two loved ones were both live take time for the surviving human to unravel, forgive, and let go after the other person dies. It may be that during this time that the surviving human experiences many synchronicities that remind him or her of the deceased loved one and the situation that was left unresolved. The deceased spirit can be making attempts to get through to the living loved one in order to show him or her that there is no grudge and no hard feelings. Remember that as the orientation process unfolds, the dead are learning about why they made the choices they did and what purpose those choices served in their lives and in the lives of those they loved and affected. Desertions, abuse, rapes, screaming, abandonment, betrayal, and other awful things are part and parcel of the human experience, learning about what love is, where it comes from, and who's responsible for giving it to whom. Though painful for the people involved on both sides of the dynamics, they are necessary for all that is to learn about becoming the source of love, learning to love the self in all the ways that others could, would, and did not love them. The dead during orientation can become oriented toward love, the entire point of the orientation process, and want to make contact with the living loved ones to let them know everything's okay. They are sorry, or they now see the big picture and want the living loved one to know that this is so. It can be confusing to the living loved one who is trying to process his or her own feelings in one way or another, or trying to avoid them. And the dead loved one coming through might not be welcome. The synchronicities that bring the dead loved one into the living one's awareness on a regular basis might be dreaded and hated if the living person is not feeling loving and accepting. Remember that the surviving loved one is not going through the same orientation process. These synchronicities might, in fact, inspire anger toward the dead loved one, making the door to resolution impossible to open until the living person can get over the negative feelings and anger that is sourced deep under the surface in pain about the state or lack of resolution of the relationship. Many true and heartfelt things go unsaid by humans to their loved ones during life for all kinds of reasons. Many of them have to do with judgment of self that is manifested as judgments of others, misunderstandings of all kinds, and lack of a willingness to apologize or be vulnerable enough to get to the bottom of deep emotional dynamics, including shared pain. It can happen that a deceased spirit wants to check in with living loved ones during the orientation process to make sure no one worries and to let them know that things are going according to plan. Once the orientation process is complete, the newly departed consciousness understands the choices, dynamics, and relationships of its human life. All of the choices made from fear are understood, and peace has come into the individual's sense of self. It is clear to this being that the particular human life just completed served as a chapter in a long-term, multi-life journey of a soul to learn about what love is. And it is at this stage that the individual is as close as possible to the loving nature of the soul itself. This is possible because the opinions, judgments, grudges, and regrets belonging to the human personality have been transformed through loving reflection into elements accepted by the individual as part of the journey of the soul of all that is, to learn about what love is, where it comes from, and who is responsible for giving it to whom. At this point, if the departed spirit visits human loved ones, it will seem as if the being is lighter, wiser, and very different to deal with than the human person always was. Certain elements of self that identified the person when living remain, but all the judgments, etc., are gone. Also, the spirit can present the self to living loved ones appearing however he or she wants. Often they come through to those they are connected to in a young and healthy form, looking good and feeling even better. It is their option how they present themselves, and it is not about misrepresentation or to fool the living, but about choosing how they want to be seen by living loved ones. Often the form chosen reflects the sense that everything is fine and that the departed person is doing well, and the living need not worry about him or her. It is at this stage that if it has been agreed to by all the souls involved, then the departed can function as a spirit guide for a living person. Not every deceased loved one becomes a guide after death, but many do, at least for a time. Often this occurs within families, such as an older relative who passes away, comes back after orientation to help out a surviving family member whom he or she knew while living. But it can also happen that members of previous generations of the family can serve as guides for a person. Another common scenario is that a person who has died and gone through orientation comes back to Earth plane to be a guide for a person whom he or she was not related during the most recent life. Your souls create a nexus of loving, supportive connection across the vast expanse of the Earth timeline, and all souls are willing to receive loving, supportive guidance from anyone who will help out. It would not be out of the ordinary for you to learn that one of your guides now is a family member from one of your previous lives, but was not related to you genetically in its most recent life, or anyone that you in your present life have known. All portions of all that is, all these souls, treat each other with loving kindness and want all the others to learn along their human journeys in the best possible way. And this is one way that they help make this happen. Those who are not open to receive love. For the other group of newly departed consciousnesses, those who are not open to change or fear they will not be loved and so cannot see it when it comes to them, it is, of course, a different story. They very often feel alone, and this becomes a deep sense of loneliness. They might reach out to living humans so they don't feel so alone. In the process, they may alienate the living because their vibration is one of fear, and humans can discern this even if they don't have words to describe it. When approached with fear in any form, most humans are afraid or defensive in response, and usually, without thinking, when this happens with departed spirits who are wandering around, it can turn out negative for all involved. Very often the dead are looking for comfort, acceptance, and to know that they are not alone. But if they inspire fear in the living, then they rarely get it. It is possible for members of this group to change their minds at any time and open to receiving love. One of the functions of human psychic mediums can be to educate the dead who have not entered the orientation process about their options. These dead need to open to being loved, and a living medium can get through to them and teach them to let go of what they have been holding on to that keeps them from opening to receive love. Very often, this fits into one of a handful of categories. 1. Judgments of their choices during human life. 2. Judgments, real or perceived, taken on about themselves from others. 3. Expectations that what is waiting for them, usually God, is not loving and accepting, but will judge them for their human life choices and flaws. 4. Perceiving a need to control the outcome of a time-space dimension event or decision, like being unwilling to let go of worldly outcomes. Often these people lived lives full of judgment of self and other. All criticisms of others indicates judging of the self and so it becomes that much more important as a human to become willing to open to becoming the source of love in your life. If you can traffic in love and give the benefit of the doubt to yourself and others that all are works in progress, and sometimes people make choices that seem unwise, but trusting that these ultimately serve the learning journey of your soul, you are far better off when you die and are faced with the opportunity to see in what ways you might not be loving. For this is what happens when the newly departed individual separates from his or her body. A louder, powerful, and very intense sense of love that most people encounter while living greets them. If a human has experienced it, it will have stopped the person in his or her tracks and caused a deeply emotional response. Encountering this level of loving energy can inspire what you have heard described as fear and trembling, a deep sense of awe that changes one's life. If you are aware of departed individuals who have not yet entered orientation, see if you can take some time to help them see the value of being loving towards themselves. This will open the door to being willing to receive love from others, including their guidance team and previously departed loved ones, those who will welcome them to what is often called the light, once they are ready to go. In the long run, it is not natural and normal for departed souls to hang around the earth dimension, and there are humans who, in their own process of learning about becoming the source of love, will perform the wonderful and kind service of helping these spirits cross over. So while it is not natural for it to persist, it is in fact a necessary part of the long-term multi-life journey of learning about becoming the source of love for the self. Even after death, an individual can resist trafficking in love and being loving. Think about someone you know in whom you find wonderful qualities that he or she cannot see. You want the best for this person, and you wish that he or she could see just how great he or she is. Sometimes you can do something to inspire this person to change his or her mind about the self, but sometimes you cannot. Sometimes the person's beliefs are too strongly held to let your kindness and encouragement in. It is the same with these departed spirits who are not yet open to receive love. The channel has done a fair amount of what is called spirit rescue and release, the process of helping souls do what is commonly called crossing over, but we are here calling entering orientation. What he does is embody a sense of being loving and then recognize the departed for who he or she is, a divine being, learning along a multi-life process of learning to be loving. He explains through his heart that he or she can choose to let go of those opinions and judgments at any time. Embodying love and with no pressure, he is able to show them what's happening and what can happen next if he or she is ready and willing. Even if the departed spirit is not ready to leave yet, he or she is always able to understand the big picture the channel describes. Sometimes a living human is the only kind of being that can get through to them if they are not aware of or do not want to open to other kinds of beings, even if the other beings would surely come to them as their guidance most definitely wants to. The newly departed consciousness must operate according to its own free will, but it is important that it become informed about just what is going on and what their options might be. When you consider such departed beings in the position of not knowing that they deserve and can open to receive love, look upon them with compassion. Understand that it is part of their human journey over the course of many lives to learn to become loving, and that even after death, some of you are not quite open to it. You may encounter one or more once in a while and feel fear. See if you can choose to generate love in the face of that fear. you would be doing a service to all that is. That, in fact, helps you, too, as that choice is part of your own process along the exact same journey.